I'm Ethan, 27 years old, and I never expected to discover my parents' secret financial betrayal. While I worked 3 jobs to afford ramen noodles in college, racking up $87,000 in debt, my sister Lily was living in a Manhattan apartment on my parents' dime. I thought we were all making sacrifices as a family. I was wrong. When my grandfather uncovered the truth about our equal college funds, everything changed in ways my parents never saw coming. Before I get into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism. Growing up in our modest 2-story home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I never suspected anything was unusual about our family dynamic. My dad, Robert, worked as an engineer at a local manufacturing company, while my mom, Nancy, taught 3rd grade at the elementary school down the street. Our neighborhood was firmly middle class. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable enough that we never worried about basic necessities. My sister Lily came along when I was 3, and from my earliest memories, she was the sparkle in my parents' eyes. At the time, I didn't see it as favoritism. It just seemed like Lily needed more attention. She was outgoing and dramatic, where I was quiet and self-sufficient. She struggled with schoolwork, while I brought home straight A's without much effort. Ethan's our rock, my mom would tell relatives at family gatherings. He's so responsible we never have to worry about him. I took pride in that identity, the reliable son who never caused problems. When Lily threw tantrums about not getting her way, I was the one who stayed calm and tried to help my parents manage the situation. The pattern continued as we grew older. On my 10th birthday, I received practical gifts, new sneakers books, a scientific calculator I had mentioned wanting for math class. 2 months later, when Lily turned 7, she got an elaborate dollhouse that must have cost 3 times what my presents did, plus a lavish party at the local roller rink with 20 classmates. "Your sister needs the extra encouragement," Dad explained when he saw me looking at the dollhouse with curiosity. "You're already so confident in yourself." I nodded and accepted this explanation. It made sense to my young mind that different children might need different types of support. The disparities became more noticeable in middle school. I joined the debate team and qualified for the state competition, but neither of my parents could attend because it conflicted with Lily's dance recital. I brought home the 2nd place trophy, and they praised me briefly before returning to gushing about Lily's solo performance. "We knew you'd do great without us there," Mom said, ruffling my hair. "You're so independent." Throughout high school, I poured myself into academics and extracurriculars, partly because I genuinely enjoyed learning, but also seeking that elusive parental approval. I became captain of the debate team, editor of the school newspaper, and maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA. Meanwhile, Lily struggled to maintain a C average, but received endless tutoring support and praise for even minimal improvement. When I was 16, my parents renovated our kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. They also took a 2-week vacation to Hawaii, leaving me to watch Lily. I didn't think much about where the money came from. Dad had mentioned getting a bonus at work, and I assumed they had been saving up. Senior year arrived, and with it, college applications. I aimed high: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, while also applying to the University of Michigan as a safety school. My guidance counselor was confident I'd get into at least one Ivy League school with my record. The acceptances rolled in, along with scholarship offers that covered partial tuition. Princeton offered the best financial package, about half of the total cost. I was ecstatic when I got the news and rushed home to share it with my parents. "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Let's talk about the financial side after dinner." That evening, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table with serious expressions. "Ethan, we're so proud of your accomplishments," Dad began, "but we need to be realistic about Princeton. We simply can't afford to help with your college expenses." The statement hit me like a physical blow, but, I thought, don't most parents save for their kids' college? Mom shifted uncomfortably. "We had hoped to, but with the house expenses, your father's car breaking down last year, and the economy being what it is, we just don't have the funds." "What about loans?" I asked. "Could you co-sign?" "Our credit isn't great right now," Dad replied, looking down at his hands. "The best thing would be for you to consider U of M. with your merit scholarship. You could live at home to save on room and board. I sat in stunned silence trying to process this information. My dream school was within reach, but without financial support, it seemed impossible. I understand if you're disappointed, Mom added, but we know how resourceful you are. If anyone can figure this out, it's you. That night I lay awake calculating numbers. With my partial scholarship, summer savings, and working throughout college, I might be able to make Princeton work with loans. It would mean graduating with substantial debt, but Princeton's career opportunities might make it worthwhile. The next morning I told my parents my decision. I'm going to Princeton. I'll take out loans and work part-time. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. If that's what you want, Dad said, just don't come complaining to us when you're drowning in debt. His tone stung, but I was determined. I had worked too hard to settle for less than my dream school. At my high school graduation, I delivered the valedictorian speech to thunderous applause. As I scanned the audience, I noticed my parents were more focused on Lily, who was fidgeting in her seat, clearly bored by the ceremony. Later at my graduation party, they spent most of the time telling relatives about Lily's accomplishments in her dance competition rather than my scholarship offers or speech. As summer wound down and college preparations began, I overheard my parents discussing Lily's private SAT tutor and how they needed to start preparing financially for her college years. She'll need more support than Ethan, Mom said. She's not as academically inclined. I pretended not to hear, but the comment lodged in my heart like a splinter. Princeton was everything I had dreamed of academically, but financially, it was a nightmare. My partial scholarship covered about 40% of my tuition, leaving me to come up with the rest through loans and work. I found a job at the campus library that gave me 15 hours a week, plus another job waiting tables at a restaurant near campus on weekends. During summer and winter breaks, I picked up as many shifts as possible at a warehouse back home, often working 60-hour weeks to save for the next semester. My typical day started at 6 in the morning. I'd study for 2 hours before my first class at 8. Between classes, I'd rush to the library for my shift, grabbing a peanut butter sandwich on the way. After work, it was more classes, then straight to the study hall until midnight. On weekends, I'd work double shifts at the restaurant, coming home exhausted, with barely enough energy to review my notes before collapsing into bed. My housing situation wasn't much better. The dorms were too expensive after freshman year, so I moved into an off-campus house with 4 other students. My room was barely larger than a closet, with just enough space for a twin bed and a desk. In winter, the drafty windows let in so much cold air that I could see my breath some mornings. I wore layers of clothes to bed and used the library for studying to save on heating costs. Meals often consisted of ramen noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever free food I could find at campus events. I became an expert at stretching $20 of groceries across an entire week. There were days when I had to choose between buying textbooks or eating proper meals. The textbooks always won. Despite these challenges, I maintained a 3.8 GPA and took extra courses each semester to graduate early and save on tuition. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, and my health suffered. I lost weight, developed persistent dark circles under my eyes, and caught every cold that went around campus. Phone calls home became increasingly rare and strained. My parents rarely asked about my studies or work, and when I mentioned financial struggles, they would quickly change the subject. "We're having our own difficulties," Mom would say. "Your father's company is cutting back hours." Yet in the background of these calls, I'd often hear them discussing upcoming vacations or home improvement projects. Once I distinctly heard Dad talking about getting tickets to a Broadway show while Mom was telling me they couldn't send even $50 to help with my textbooks. I visited home only twice during my freshman year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, partly because I couldn't afford more trips, and partly because the contrast between my life and what I saw at home was becoming harder to ignore. During Thanksgiving break of my sophomore year, I noticed Lily driving a brand new Honda Civic. "Nice car," I commented, as she pulled into the driveway. "Whose is it?" "Mine," she exclaimed. "Mom and Dad got it for my 16th birthday. Isn't it awesome?" I stared at the car, which had to have cost at least $20,000, while thinking about the $100 limit on my credit card that I used only for absolute emergencies. Inside the house had new furniture, and Lily's room had been completely redecorated with expensive-looking items. She had the latest iPhone, a MacBook Pro, and designer clothes that still had tags on them. When I asked about these expenses, my parents had ready explanations. "The car was a great deal from your father's colleague," Mom said. "And Lily's computer was necessary for her schoolwork. She struggles with attention, not like you." "The furniture was on clearance," Dad added. "And we had store credit from returning those appliances that didn't work right." I nodded and pretended to believe these explanations, though they seemed increasingly implausible. Still, I didn't want to create conflict during my brief time at home. My junior year was the hardest. I developed insomnia from stress and started having anxiety attacks before exams. The constant pressure of maintaining my grades while working 30 hours a week was taking its toll. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose and started having recurring headaches. I applied for additional scholarships and grants, but competition was fierce, and I secured only one small grant of $2,000. Helpful, but barely making a dent in my expenses. Meanwhile, Lily's social media posts showed her going on shopping sprees, attending concerts, and enjoying weekends away with friends. In one photo, I spotted her wearing a Gucci watch that I knew cost more than 3 months of my rent. I graduated a semester early in December of my senior year with honors in economics and $87,000 in student loan debt. My parents attended the ceremony but left immediately after to get back for Lily's choir concert that evening. I moved to Chicago for an entry-level marketing position at a mid-sized firm. The salary was decent, but much of it went toward loan payments and basic living expenses. I shared an apartment with 2 other recent graduates to keep costs down. 6 months after my graduation, I returned home for Lily's high school graduation. During the ceremony, my parents beamed with pride as she received her diploma with a 2.9 GPA. At the party afterward, they made a big announcement. "We're so proud to share that Lily will be attending New York University in the fall," Dad proclaimed to the gathered family and friends. "We've also arranged for her to have an apartment in Manhattan, so she can fully experience city life." I nearly choked on my drink. NYU was even more expensive than Princeton and Manhattan apartments rented for astronomical amounts. How could they possibly afford this when they couldn't help me at all? "That's great," I managed to say. When everyone looked at me for a reaction, "Congratulations, Lily." Later, I cautiously asked my mom about the financial aspects of Lily's college plans. "Oh, we've been planning for this for years," she said dismissively. "The economy is better now, and your father got that promotion 2 years ago. It's just different timing than when you went to school." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, without revealing my growing suspicion and hurt. Over the next year, Lily's Instagram filled with photos of her lavish NYU life. Her spacious Manhattan apartment, with a view of the city weekend trips to Boston and Washington, D.C. Expensive restaurant meals and shopping bags from designer stores. Each post felt like salt in an open wound. Despite my growing suspicions, I tried to rationalize the situation. Perhaps my parents really had come into more money recently. Maybe they had learned from my experience and wanted to do better for Lily. Or possibly, they had received family help they were too proud to mention. Whatever the explanation, I tried to focus on building my own life, rather than dwelling on the apparent discrepancy. But the questions lingered, growing louder each time I made a student loan payment or had to decline an outing with friends because I couldn't afford it. 3 years after my graduation, I had established myself at the marketing firm in Chicago and was slowly climbing the corporate ladder. My student loan balance had decreased to $78,000 through aggressive payments that consumed nearly half my monthly income. I lived frugally, rarely took vacations, and had started building a modest emergency fund. That Thanksgiving, I drove the 4 hours from Chicago to my parents' home in Ann Arbor. I arrived earlier than expected and let myself in with my old house key. The house was quiet. Mom had texted that they were picking up last-minute groceries and would be back soon. As I settled in the living room, I heard voices coming from my father's study. Apparently, they had returned without my noticing. The door was ajar, and I could hear my parents engaged in a heated discussion. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their raised voices carried clearly. $12,000 for a semester in Paris is ridiculous, Robert, my mother, was saying. We already pay her tuition rent and give her a generous monthly allowance. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Nancy, my father replied. We can use more of the college fund. There's still plenty left. I froze. College fund. What college fund? We've already used more than we planned, Mom argued. At this rate, there won't be anything left for graduate school if she decides to go. The investments have performed better than expected, Dad countered. And it's not like we're dipping into our retirement. This is what the money was set aside for. I sat motionless, my mind racing. Had there been a college fund all along? One that was apparently substantial enough to cover NYU tuition, Manhattan rent, and now a semester abroad in Paris. Before I could process this information, I heard footsteps approaching, and my parents emerged from the study. They startled upon seeing me. Ethan, we didn't hear you come in, Mom exclaimed, her face flushing. I just got here. I lied, not wanting to admit I'd overheard them. The door was unlocked. We exchanged awkward hugs, and they asked about my drive and job. Throughout dinner preparation, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard. I needed to know the truth. After we sat down to eat and exchanged preliminary small talk, I took a deep breath. I heard something interesting earlier. I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Something about Lily's college fund and a semester in Paris. My parents exchanged a quick glance. Dad set down his fork. Yes, Lily's considering a study abroad program, he said carefully. It's a good opportunity for her French major. I'm curious about the college fund you mentioned, I pressed. I didn't realize there was money set aside for our education. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Finally, Mom spoke. The financial situation was different when you went to college, Ethan. The economy was worse, and we had some unexpected expenses. What kind of expenses? I asked, my heart pounding. Home repairs, medical bills, various things, Dad said vaguely. Plus the investments we had for your college fund didn't mature as expected. So there was a college fund for me, I asked directly. Another glance between them. Mom's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Yes, we started college funds for both of you when you were born, she admitted. Your grandfather helped us set them up. What happened to mine? My voice was barely controlled now. Dad sighed. We had to use it for other purposes when you were in high school. The kitchen renovation, some debt consolidation, our Hawaii trip. We intended to replace it before you went to college, but things didn't work out that way. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The kitchen renovation I had admired at 16. The Hawaii vacation I wasn't invited on. The home improvements that continued throughout my college years. All paid for, with money that had been set aside for my education. And Lily's fund, I asked already, knowing the answer. We preserved it. Dad said, not meeting my eyes. Her academic situation was different. We knew she'd need more support than you. Because I was the responsible one, I quoted their frequent description of me, the words tasting bitter. Exactly, Mom said, seemingly relieved that I understood. You were always so capable, Ethan. You got scholarships, you were resourceful. Lily isn't like that. She needs more support. So you took the money meant for my education and spent it on home improvements and vacations while preserving Lily's fund intact. I clarified, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible, Dad said defensively. We made the decisions we thought were best at the time. Best for whom? I asked. Do you have any idea what I went through in college? Working 30 hours a week while taking a full course load, skipping meals to afford textbooks. Living in an apartment so cold I could see my breath in winter. You never told us it was that bad, Mom said weakly. I tried. Every time I mentioned money problems, you changed the subject or told me about your own financial difficulties. Difficulties that somehow didn't prevent you from renovating the house again or taking weekend trips to Chicago. My hands were shaking now, and I pushed back from the table. How much was in my fund originally? I asked. They exchanged another look. The same as Lily's, Dad finally admitted. About $120,000. The number struck me like a physical blow. $120,000. More than enough to cover my entire Princeton education with money left over. Instead, I'd graduated with crippling debt that would take me years, possibly decades, to pay off. And how much have you spent on Lily's education so far? I continued, needing to understand the full extent of the disparity. More uncomfortable shifting. NYU is about $60,000 a year with tuition and housing, Dad mumbled. Plus her monthly allowance and the extra courses and travel. I did the quick math in my head, so approximately $150,000 for her first 2 years with more to come, while I graduated $87,000 in debt. When you calculate it like that, Mom began. How else should I calculate it? I interrupted. You had equal funds for both your children. You spent mine on yourselves, and preserved hers for its intended purpose. That's a difference of over $200,000 in how you treated your 2 children. Ethan, you have to understand, Dad said, his tone hardening. We always knew you would be fine no matter what. You're smart, resourceful, driven. Lily isn't like that. Without our support, she wouldn't succeed. So, I was punished for being capable. The irony was almost too much to bear. I worked my ass off in high school, earned a spot at Princeton, and that somehow justified you abandoning your financial responsibility to me while pampering Lily. We didn't pamper, Mom started to object. Manhattan apartment, monthly allowance, shopping sprees I see all over Instagram, weekend trips, now a semester in Paris, I listed. If that's not pampering, what is? My parents fell silent, unable to counter these points. Did Lily know about this? I asked suddenly. Did she know there was a college fund for me? That you spent? Of course not, Mom said quickly. She doesn't need to know about these financial details. I stood up, no longer able to sit at the table with them. I need some air. Ethan, don't leave like this, Mom pleaded. It's Thanksgiving. We can talk this through. Talk what through? You've made your priorities clear for years. I just didn't want to see it. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. I'll be back for my things later. I'm going to a hotel tonight. You're overreacting, Dad called after me. This is what I mean about Lily needing more support. She's emotional like you're being right now. You've always been the rational one. I paused at the door, turning back to look at them. No, Dad. I've always been the one you could ignore and take advantage of because I wouldn't complain. That ends today. I drove to a nearby hotel in a blur of anger and pain. Once in my room, the emotions I'd been controlling burst forth. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried for the first time in years, for the exhausted college student who'd worked himself to illness, for the young man who'd believed his parents when they said they couldn't help for all, the unnecessary struggle and hardship I'd endured while my sister lived in luxury. That night, I pulled out my laptop and made a detailed spreadsheet of the financial disparities between my college experience and Lily's. The numbers were even worse than I'd initially calculated. Between the depleted college fund, the interest on my student loans, the lost income from working, instead of focusing on internships and networking, and the direct support Lily received, the difference in how my parents had treated us financially amounted to well over $250,000. I stared at the final number, feeling sick to my stomach. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the unequal love and support it represented. For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth: my parents had favored Lily my entire life, and I had been in denial about it. The months following that Thanksgiving were some of the darkest of my life. I returned to Chicago the next day without seeing my parents again, sending only a brief text that I'd left and wouldn't be back for Christmas. My phone filled with messages from them over the next few weeks, first defensive, then angry, finally pleading. I read them all but responded to none. I wasn't ready to hear more justifications or excuses. Ethan, you're being childish about this. Every family has different dynamics. We never meant to hurt you. We made the best decisions we could at the time. Please call us. We miss you and want to work this out. In January, I received a text from Lily with pictures attached. Look at my view in Paris. Miss you, big bro. Why aren't you talking to Mom and Dad? The photos showed a stunning apartment overlooking the Seine, with the Eiffel Tower visible in the distance. I couldn't bring myself to respond to her either. It wasn't Lily's fault, but seeing her enjoying the benefits of my parents' favoritism was too painful. Sleep became elusive. Most nights I'd lie awake, replaying memories from childhood through college, recognizing the pattern of favoritism that had been present all along. Simple memories took on new painful significance. Dad attending every one of Lily's dance recitals while missing my debate championships. Mom spending hours helping Lily with homework while telling me to figure it out myself. The lavish Sweet 16 party for Lily while my 18th birthday had warranted only a family dinner. At work, I struggled to focus. My performance reviews, previously stellar, began to show concerns about my concentration and energy level. I made careless mistakes in presentations and missed deadlines I would have easily met before. My friends in Chicago noticed the change too. When they invited me out, I usually declined, not having the energy for social interaction. When I did join them, I was distant and distracted. "Dude, what's going on with you?" my friend Marcus asked, after I barely participated in a conversation about our fantasy football league, something I'd always been passionate about. "You've been like a zombie for months." I gave vague answers about work stress or not sleeping well. The truth felt too raw, too personal to share. After 2 months of this deterioration, I finally made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Karen Lewis listened as I poured out the whole story in our first session. "What you're describing is a profound betrayal of trust," she said when I finished. "Your parents violated what most people would consider a basic responsibility to their children: equal treatment and support." Her validation brought tears to my eyes. For months I'd been questioning whether I was overreacting, whether I was being entitled or ungrateful. Hearing a professional confirm the legitimacy of my feelings was powerfully validating. Over the next several sessions, Dr. Lewis helped me process my anger and grief. She explained that I was essentially mourning the loss of the parents I thought I had and coming to terms with who they really were. "You're experiencing a form of retrospective trauma," she explained. "You're not just dealing with the present betrayal, but reinterpreting your entire childhood through this new lens." In March, my parents escalated their attempts to contact me. They called my workplace when I continued to ignore their calls and texts. They even contacted Marcus, whose number they had from years ago, to check if I was physically okay. Finally, I sent them an email. "I need space to process what I've learned. I'm physically fine, but not ready to talk. Please respect my boundaries, and don't contact my workplace or friends again." They backed off after that, though Mom still sent weekly text messages that I read but didn't answer. April brought my annual performance review at work. My manager Sarah was sympathetic but direct. "Ethan, your work has suffered significantly over the past few months. You've been with us for 3 years, and until recently, you were on track for a promotion. I want to help you get back to that place, but I need to know what's going on." I gave her a simplified version of the situation, leaving out the detailed financial aspects, but explaining the family betrayal I was processing. "Take some personal time," she suggested. 2 weeks paid. Sort yourself out and come back, ready to focus." I accepted her offer gratefully. During those 2 weeks, I doubled up on therapy sessions, started a regular exercise routine to help with sleep, and began journaling about my feelings. Slowly, I felt my mental fog beginning to lift. The pain was still there, but it was becoming more manageable. When I returned to work, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus, partly as a way to avoid dwelling on family issues. My performance improved, and by June, Sarah mentioned that the promotion was back on the table if I maintained my current trajectory. In May, my parents sent a formal invitation to Lily's graduation party. I declined via text message, my first direct communication with them in 6 months. This triggered another round of messages. "Ethan, this is ridiculous. It's your sister's graduation. How can you punish her for our decisions? We understand you're hurt, but this has gone on long enough. It's time to act like an adult and talk to us." Their dismissal of my feelings only reinforced my decision to maintain distance. I sent Lily a separate congratulatory text with an Amazon gift card explaining that I had work commitments and couldn't attend. It wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't ready to explain the real situation to her. As summer progressed, the intensity of my anger began to subside, replaced by a deep sadness and a growing sense of resolution. I wasn't ready to forgive my parents, but I was beginning to accept that they might never truly understand or acknowledge the depth of their betrayal. In therapy, Dr. Lewis and I discussed what future relationship with my family might look like. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the way things were, she emphasized. It means freeing yourself from the expectation that they'll ever be different than who they've shown themselves to be. In July, I received the promotion at work with a significant salary increase that would allow me to accelerate my student loan payments. The achievement felt bittersweet. I was proud of my professional growth, but aware that I'd had to work so much harder than necessary because of my parents' choices. As my 27th birthday approached in August, I decided not to respond to my parents' texts about celebration plans. Instead, I treated myself to a weekend trip to Lake Michigan with friends. It was the first time in months I felt genuinely happy, and present not weighed down by family drama. The day after my birthday, I received an unexpected call from my grandfather Samuel. Though we'd always been close, our contact had become less frequent after I moved to Chicago. I'd avoided calling him during this family conflict, not wanting to put him in the middle. Ethan, my boy, his familiar gravelly voice brought unexpected comfort. "Happy belated birthday. I've been trying to reach you." "Thanks, Grandpa," I replied, genuinely happy to hear from him. "Sorry I've been hard to reach lately." "Your parents mentioned there's been some tension," he said carefully. "They didn't give details, but I can tell something serious has happened. I'm worried about you." I hesitated, not wanting to drag him into the situation, but also desperately needing someone from the family who might understand. "It's complicated, Grandpa," I finally said. "I discovered some things about how my parents handled finances for my education versus Lily's that were upsetting." "I see," he said slowly. "Would you be open to a visit? I've been thinking about seeing Chicago again, and it would give us a chance to talk in person." The thought of seeing my grandfather, the one family member I still trusted implicitly, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'd like that very much," I said. "Good. I'll book a flight for next weekend if that works for you." As I hung up, I felt a small spark of hope for the first time in months. Grandpa Samuel had always been fair and honest with me. Even if he couldn't change what had happened, his perspective might help me find some closure. The following Saturday, I picked up Grandpa Samuel from O'Hare Airport. At 76, he still stood tall and straight, his full head of white hair and sharp blue eyes giving him a distinguished appearance. We embraced warmly before heading to my apartment. "You look thin," were his first words as we settled in my living room. "And those circles under your eyes tell me you're not sleeping well." I smiled weakly. "It's been a rough few months." "Tell me what happened," he said, getting straight to the point, as he always did, the full story. I hesitated, not wanting to turn him against his son, my father. I won't judge until I've heard everything he promised, reading my reluctance. But I can't help if I don't know what we're dealing with. Over the next 2 hours, I laid out the whole situation. The discovery of the college funds, the financial disparities, my parents' justifications, and the months of minimal contact since Thanksgiving. Grandpa listened intently, asking occasional clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the information. When I finished, he sat in silence for several minutes, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "I helped set up those college funds," he said quietly. "Equal amounts for both you and Lily when you were born. I contributed the initial $20,000 for each of you." This new information stunned me. "You did." He nodded. "Your parents added to them over the years, but yes, that was my gift to my grandchildren. I wanted to ensure you both had opportunities I never had." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "I didn't have the chance to go to college," he continued. "I worked in the auto plant for 43 years, starting right after high school. But I was determined my son would have that opportunity. I worked 2 jobs for 20 years to put your father through Michigan State." He turned back to me, his eyes now showing a hint of anger. "To hear that he squandered your fund while preserving Lily's, and," he shook his head, "it goes against everything I taught him about fairness and responsibility." His validation brought a lump to my throat. I thought maybe I was overreacting. "You're not," he said firmly. "What they did was wrong, plain and simple. Using your college fund for home renovations and vacations while sending Lily to an expensive private university with all the trimmings. It's unconscionable." He sat back down, his expression resolute. "This needs to be addressed directly with everyone present. No more swept under the rug." "I'm not sure I'm ready to face them," I admitted. You don't have to do it alone, Grandpa assured me. I'll be there. But Ethan, this isn't just about you and your parents. Lily should know the truth too. I hadn't considered that aspect. You think she should be involved? She's an adult now, and this concerns her too. She deserves to know the reality of the situation, not whatever story your parents have told her about your absence. After further discussion, we formulated a plan. Grandpa would return to Michigan and call a family meeting at his house the following weekend without revealing the specific topic. As his only son and grandchildren, we were all expected to attend his summons without question. The week that followed was anxiety-filled. I alternated between relief that the situation would finally be addressed and dread at facing my parents and sister. Dr. Lewis helped me prepare emotionally during an extra therapy session. Remember, you're not responsible for their reactions, she emphasized. Your grandfather is creating a safe space for truth to come out. That's healthy, even if it's uncomfortable. Saturday arrived too quickly. I drove to Michigan with my stomach in knots, arriving at Grandpa's modest but well-kept home in the early afternoon. My parents' car was already in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I walked in. The atmosphere in the living room was tense. Mom jumped up when she saw me moving, as if to hug me, but stopping when she saw my guarded expression. Dad nodded stiffly from his seat. Lily looked confused and concerned, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. "Ethan," she exclaimed, giving me a quick hug. "I've missed you. Why haven't you been answering my texts from Paris?" Before I could formulate a response, Grandpa called us all to sit down. "I've brought you here today because our family is in crisis," he began without preamble. "There's been a serious breach of trust that needs to be addressed." My parents shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Lily looked increasingly bewildered. "What's going on?" she asked. "Is someone sick?" "No, dear," Grandpa assured her. "But something has come to light that affects all of you, particularly you and Ethan." With methodical precision, Grandpa laid out what he had discovered. He had gone to his financial advisor and requested all records related to the college funds he had helped establish. He had spreadsheets, bank statements, and a timeline showing exactly when and how Ethan's fund had been depleted while Lily's remained intact and grew. "Robert, Nancy," he addressed my parents, "you withdrew the majority of Ethan's college fund when he was 16, using it for home renovations, debt consolidation, and a vacation to Hawaii. You continued making smaller withdrawals until the account was empty by his senior year of high school." He placed the documents on the coffee table. "Meanwhile, you preserved and continued contributing to Lily's fund, which now, even after 2 years of NYU expenses, still contains over $40,000. My mother's face had gone pale. Dad stared at the floor, unable to meet his father's eyes. "Is this true?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Ethan had a college fund too. There were circumstances you don't understand." My father began defensively. "We had financial pressures. That didn't prevent you from renovating your kitchen with high-end appliances or taking vacations," Grandpa interrupted. "The bank statements don't lie, Robert." He turned to me. "Ethan graduated with $87,000 in student loan debt that he's still paying off. Meanwhile, you've spent approximately $150,000 on Lily's education so far, with plans to fund a semester in Paris and potentially graduate school." Lily looked at me, horror dawning on her face. "I had no idea," she whispered. "They told me there wasn't much money for college, and that you got scholarships that covered everything." "I had partial scholarships," I corrected quietly. "I worked 30 hours a week throughout college and still graduated with massive debt." "The financial disparity is bad enough," Grandpa continued, "but what concerns me even more is the justification. You've repeatedly told Ethan he didn't need support because he was responsible and capable, essentially punishing him for his positive qualities while rewarding Lily's struggles with additional support." My mother finally found her voice. "That's not fair. We weren't punishing Ethan. We just knew he could handle challenges." By that logic, Grandpa countered, "You should have given him every advantage to see how far he could go with proper support, not added unnecessary obstacles to his path." The room fell silent as the truth of his words sank in. I never would have accepted all this If I'd known Lily, said, tears streaming down her face. The apartment, the allowance. Paris. I thought it was normal that you were doing the same for Ethan when he was in college. Dad finally looked up. We wanted to give you the support you needed, Lily. Ethan was different. No. I spoke up, finding my voice. You convinced yourselves I was different to justify your favoritism. The truth is, you took the easy route with me because I didn't complain, and you indulged Lily because it was more comfortable than holding her to the same standards you held me to. My father started to object, but Grandpa raised his hand. There's something else you all should know, he said. I've lived modestly my entire life despite having the means to live more comfortably. I've done this partially to help secure your futures. This was news to all of us, including my father. Dad, what are you talking about? He asked, confusion, temporarily overriding defensiveness. I've been fortunate with investments over the years, Grandpa explained. The initial contributions to the grandchildren's college funds were just the beginning. I've maintained a separate education trust that I intended to distribute equally between Ethan and Lily upon completion of their undergraduate degrees to help with graduate school or starting their careers. He fixed my parents with a stern look. In light of what's happened, I'm restructuring my will and financial plans. I'll be paying off Ethan's student loans immediately to rectify this injustice. My parents looked stunned. Lily was openly crying now. Additionally, Grandpa continued, any further education expenses for Lily will come directly from me with stipulations about reasonable spending. The remaining funds will be held in trust for both of you, with independent trustees, ensuring equal treatment. He turned to my parents. Robert, Nancy, I'm deeply disappointed in your choices. You've damaged your relationship with your son and created an unhealthy dynamic between your children. I suggest you take this opportunity to reflect on your values and begin making amends. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father broke down, burying his face in his hands. I never saw it that way, he said through tears. We always told ourselves we were doing what each of you needed. But looking at these numbers, seeing it all laid out like this, he looked up at me. I'm so sorry, Ethan. We failed you. My mother reached for my hand, which I allowed after a moment's hesitation. I don't know how we can ever make this right, she said, her voice breaking. But I want to try. Lily moved to sit beside me on the couch. I'll decline the Paris semester, she said firmly. And I'll get a job to cover my expenses next year. No, I said, surprising myself. This isn't about punishing you for their decisions, Lily. This is about truth and accountability. Grandpa nodded approvingly. Exactly. This isn't about taking anything away from Lily. It's about acknowledging the injustice done to Ethan and taking steps to repair the damage. He suggested family counseling, which my parents reluctantly agreed to. By the end of that long emotional afternoon, the first tentative steps toward healing had been taken. As Lily and I stood in Grandpa's driveway later, she hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never would have accepted all that if I'd known what you were going through. I know, I assured her. This isn't your fault. I'm going to make changes anyway, she insisted. I don't need all the extras they've been giving me. And I want to hear about everything you went through. The real story, not their version. As I drove back to Chicago that evening, I felt emotionally drained, but lighter somehow. The truth was finally out, and while the path to healing would be long and difficult, at least we were all walking in the light of honesty now. The most powerful moment of all had been my grandfather's quiet words to me. As I left, forgiveness is a process, not an event, Ethan. Don't rush it. Some wounds need time to heal properly. The weeks following Grandpa's intervention were turbulent but necessary. True to his word, Grandpa arranged for my student loans to be paid in full, an action that brought me to tears when he showed me the confirmation. The crushing weight I'd carried since graduation lifted instantly, though the emotional burden remained. My parents' initial shock and remorse gradually gave way to a more complex range of reactions. Dad alternated between defensive justifications and genuine contrition, while Mom seemed truly devastated by the realization of what they had done. 2 weeks after the meeting at Grandpa's house, we all gathered at a family therapist's office in Ann Arbor, my first professional interaction with my parents since Thanksgiving. Dr. Melissa Chen, a family counseling specialist, facilitated what became an explosive but ultimately productive session. I'd like each of you to express how you feel about the financial disparities we've discussed without interruption. From others, Dr. Chen began after we'd reviewed the basic facts. When my turn came, years of bottled emotions poured out. I feel betrayed, at the most fundamental level, I said, my voice shaking, despite my efforts to stay composed. It's not just about the money, it's what it represents. Every time you dipped into my college fund for a vacation or home improvement, you were saying that your short-term comfort was more important than my future. Every time you praised me for being responsible, while using that as an excuse to withhold support, you were exploiting my good qualities instead of nurturing them. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but remained silent, as instructed. The worst part is that you lied to me. I continued. You told me there was no money when I needed it, most forcing me to work myself to exhaustion and graduate with crippling debt, while secretly funding Lily's luxury apartment and spending money. How can I ever trust anything you say again? When I finished, there was a heavy silence in the room. Dr. Chen turned to my parents. Robert, Nancy, how do you respond to what Ethan has shared? Dad cleared his throat. I want to say that we never intended to hurt you, Ethan, but I realize now that doesn't matter. The fact is, we did hurt you, deeply and repeatedly. Looking at it through your eyes, I'm ashamed of the choices we made. His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse, rather than defensive justification. We told ourselves stories to make our decisions seem reasonable. Mom added, tears streaming down her face. We convinced ourselves that you didn't need the help, that Lily would fail without extra support, that we'd make it up to you somehow later. But the truth is, we took the path of least resistance. You didn't complain, so it was easier to let you handle things on your own, while giving in to Lily's needs and wants. Dr. Chen turned to Lily next, who had been unusually quiet. I feel horrible, she said simply. Like I've been living a lie. All those times I complained about not having enough spending money in New York, while Ethan was working multiple jobs just to eat. She looked at me directly. I would have given it all up if I'd known Ethan. I swear I would have. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with Dr. Chen guiding us through difficult but necessary terrain. At one point, my mother revealed something that cast new light on the situation. I need to explain something, though it's not an excuse, she said hesitantly. In my family, my parents openly favored my brother. They paid for his college, his car, his wedding, while telling me I needed to be independent. I swore I'd never treat my children differently, but I think I internalized that pattern more than I realized. I normalized differential treatment because it was what I knew. This revelation didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me understand the generational pattern at work, one I was determined would end with me. Near the end of the session, Dad brought up a concrete step toward resolution. We want to pay you back, Ethan, he said. Not just emotionally, but financially. Your grandfather has taken care of the student loans, but there's the lost income from all those working hours. The stress, the opportunities you missed, because you were stretched so thin. Money isn't the primary issue here, I responded. It's trust and equal treatment. I understand that, he acknowledged. But making financial amends is part of taking responsibility. We've discussed selling our vacation property in northern Michigan to create a fund for you equal to what we've spent on Lily's education. The offer surprised me. The lakeside cabin had been in our family for years and was my father's pride and joy. That he would consider selling it showed a seriousness I hadn't expected. Let me think about it, I said, not ready to accept or reject the offer. As we were leaving, Lily pulled me aside. I've decided to move out of the Manhattan apartment, she told me. I found a more affordable place in Brooklyn, with roommates, and I've gotten a part-time job at a cafe. I don't want to be part of the problem anymore. You don't have to do that, Lily, I said, touched by her gesture, but not wanting her to suffer unnecessarily. I want to, she insisted. It doesn't feel right to live in luxury knowing how you struggled. Besides, I think I need to learn some of the responsibility and independence you developed. It's not fair that they put all that on you, but those are still valuable skills I'm lacking. Over the next several months, our family began the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. Weekly therapy sessions continued sometimes together and sometimes in various combinations. Grandpa Samuel became an essential mediator, his moral clarity helping to guide us when emotions threatened to derail progress. The most significant breakthrough came 4 months after Grandpa's intervention during a particularly intense therapy session. I need to know why I said to my parents, after we had circled around the same issues for weeks. Not the surface reasons or justifications, but the deep why. What made you think it was acceptable to deprive one child while indulging the other? My father sat silently for a long moment, then spoke with a vulnerability I'd rarely seen from him. I was afraid, he admitted finally. Afraid Lily would fail without our support. Afraid she'd end up struggling in life. But with you, Ethan, I was afraid of something different. I was afraid you'd surpass me. His honesty stunned the room into silence. You were so bright, so capable from such a young age. I saw in you all the potential I never fulfilled in myself, and instead of nurturing that I think part of me wanted to see if you'd overcome the obstacles. To prove how extraordinary you were. It was selfish and wrong, and I'm deeply ashamed. That raw confession marked a turning point. While it didn't erase the pain or instantly restore trust, it opened a door to genuine understanding that had previously been closed. My mother had her own breakthrough when she recognized how she had recreated her childhood dynamics, unconsciously creating a favored and unfavored child, despite her intentions to do the opposite. I think I favored Lily because I was the unfavored child, she said through tears. I identified with her struggles and wanted to give her what I never had. Meanwhile, I saw you as like my brother, naturally gifted, capable without help. I projected my childhood wounds onto both of you, and that was deeply unfair. By the 6-month mark, tentative new patterns had begun to emerge in our family. My parents declined my grandfather's offer to fund Lily's semester abroad, insisting she apply for scholarships and work-study opportunities if she wanted that experience. They began treating their adult children with more equal consideration, though the scars of past disparities remained. Lily and I developed a closer relationship than we'd ever had before. Without the unconscious competition fostered by our parents' differential treatment, we discovered a genuine appreciation for each other's strengths and support for each other's challenges. My father ultimately decided not to sell the lake cabin, but instead put it in a trust for both Lily and me to share equally. It was a symbolic gesture, but an important one, a family asset that would be preserved for both children without favoritism. As for Grandpa Samuel, he became an even more central figure in my life. We spoke weekly, and I visited him monthly. His wisdom and unwavering moral compass provided a model of integrity I deeply respected. Your father isn't a bad man, he told me during one of these visits. He's a flawed man who made serious mistakes. The question isn't whether he deserves forgiveness. That's for you to decide in your own time. The question is, what kind of relationship you want with your family going forward, knowing what you now know about them. It was a profound question, one I continued to wrestle with as the months passed. The easy trust of childhood was gone forever, but in its place, a more mature, honest relationship was slowly taking root, one based on who my family members truly were, not who I had imagined or hoped them to be. 1 year after Grandpa Samuel's intervention, I found myself back at his house for a small family gathering to celebrate his 77th birthday. As I watched my parents, sister, and grandfather interact, I reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. The initial raw pain had gradually transformed into something more complex. Not gone, but changed. Like a broken bone that heals stronger at the fracture point, our family had been fundamentally altered by the breaking and subsequent mending. My student loans were fully paid off, removing a burden that had shaped every financial decision since graduation. With that weight lifted, I'd been able to start building savings and even purchased my first condo in Chicago with Grandpa's help with the down payment, a modest but comfortable place that represented security I had once thought decades away. The weekly family therapy sessions had continued for 6 months, then tapered to monthly check-ins. Through that process, deeper patterns emerged that went beyond the financial favoritism that had triggered our crisis. Differential treatment of siblings often reveals parents' unresolved issues, Dr. Chen had explained. It's rarely about the children themselves. and more about what they represent to the parents. This insight helped me understand that my parents' behavior, while harmful, hadn't been a rejection of me personally, but a manifestation of their own insecurities and unhealed wounds. Understanding didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me contextualize them. My relationship with Lily had transformed most dramatically. Without the unconscious competition fostered by our parents' favoritism, we developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect. She had followed through on moving to a more modest apartment in Brooklyn with roommates and getting a part-time job at a cafe while continuing her studies. The experience of managing her own finances and working while in school had given her a new appreciation for what I had endured. I never realized how exhausting it is, she admitted during one of our regular phone calls. Working till midnight and then having to study for exams. I don't know how you maintained your GPA while doing this for 4 years. Her genuine respect meant more than any apology could have. My professional life had flourished as well, with the emotional burden lightened my focus and creativity at work returned stronger than before. 6 months after the confrontation, I received another promotion to marketing director, overseeing a team of 8 people and significantly increasing my salary. My parents had made genuine efforts to change their behavior, though the process wasn't always smooth. Dad still occasionally slipped into old patterns of expecting more from me than from Lily. But now I could address these moments directly, instead of silently accepting them. "Dad, you're doing it again," I would say when I noticed the disparity. "You asked me to help with the kitchen renovation but told Lily she didn't need to worry about it because she's busy with school." These callouts were uncomfortable, but necessary, and over time, my father became more conscious of his unconscious biases. Mom made perhaps the most profound changes, diving deep into therapy to understand how her childhood experiences had shaped her parenting. She joined a support group for adult children of dysfunctional families and began to recognize how the favoritism she had experienced as the unfavored child had led her to recreate that dynamic with her own children. "I thought I was protecting Lily," she explained during a heartfelt conversation, "but I was really trying to protect the wounded child in myself. You got cast in the role of the capable one who didn't need protection, just like I was cast as the strong one in my family." Breaking these generational patterns required constant vigilance and commitment from all of us. There were setbacks and difficult moments, but the overall trajectory was toward healing. The most meaningful change, however, was the shift toward honesty and accountability. No more unspoken resentments or hidden disparities. Everything was now discussed openly, even when uncomfortable. Grandpa Samuel remained the family's moral center, gently but firmly calling out any return to old patterns. His intervention had not only addressed the immediate financial injustice, but had established a new standard of integrity for our family. "Money reveals priorities," he told me during one of our regular chess games. "It's easy to talk about loving your children equally, but how you spend your resources, money, time, attention, reveals your true values." As I sat at his birthday celebration, watching him blow out the candles on his cake, I felt a deep gratitude for his wisdom and courage. Without his intervention, I might have eventually cut ties with my family, entirely carrying unresolved pain and anger for years. After the party, as everyone was helping with cleanup, my 15-year-old cousin Jake approached me privately. "Ethan, can I ask your advice about something?" he asked hesitantly. "I'm starting to think about colleges, and my parents keep saying they can't afford to help much, but they just bought my brother a car for his birthday." I recognized the familiar pattern immediately, the same dynamic threatening to repeat in another branch of the family. Instead of dismissing his concerns or telling him to simply work harder, I took him seriously. "Let's sit down and talk through this," I said, guiding him to the porch swing. "What you're noticing is important, and you deserve equal support from your parents." As I helped Jake strategize about how to address the situation with his parents and what financial options might be available to him, I realized I had gained wisdom from my painful experience that could now help others. The cycle of favoritism that had damaged my family for generations might finally be broken. That evening, as I prepared to drive back to Chicago, Grandpa Samuel walked me to my car. "I'm proud of you, Ethan," he said simply. "Not just for your professional success, but for how you've handled this past year. You've shown remarkable strength and maturity." "I learned from the best," I replied, embracing him. "Remember this," he said, as we pulled apart. Your worth was never determined by how your parents treated you. Their limitations don't define your value. His words crystallized the most profound lesson of this difficult journey, that self-worth comes from within, not from external validation or equal treatment by others. While I deserved fairness and honesty from my family, my value as a person had never depended on receiving it. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the complexity of forgiveness. I hadn't fully forgiven my parents yet, and perhaps I never would, in the complete sense of the word. But I had found a way to move forward with them, to build a new relationship based on truth rather than illusion. The trust that had been broken might never be fully restored, but something different, and potentially valuable, could still grow in its place. The wounds of favoritism and betrayal had cut deep, but they had also carved space for growth, awareness, and greater authenticity. Family relationships, I had learned, are not static entities, but living connections that require constant tending, honest communication, and mutual accountability. Most importantly, I had discovered that healing doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It means integrating the experience into your life story in a way that allows you to move forward with wisdom rather than bitterness. That night, for the first time in over a year, I slept peacefully through the night, without the weight of unresolved anger or the shadows of old pain. The journey wasn't over. Healing never really is. But I had found a path forward that honored both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. What about you? Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences can be the first step toward healing. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, even those who should love you the most equally. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey of healing.